We all build technology, and there's always a shiny thing coming up. There's AI, there's machine learning, now there's robotic process automation.
When you think about RPA, if everybody wanted to be tremendously conservative, then you would move at a snail's pace. And so you have to get people comfortable. And, I'm actually willing to take a little bit of risk to get some results.
When we talk about health data, we need to be focused on social determinant data, biomedical device data, over time, genomic, proteomic data, imaging data, et cetera, because that's where you're going to really get the source and capability to really drive the insights with things like AI, machine learning, et cetera.
I get this so many different times where people have 3 or 4 screens open and they're trying to make sense out of some amount of data, throw it into an Excel spreadsheet. And then I ask them, what are you? Well, I'm an economist, not a spreadsheet expert, right? But we've turned these people because IT is so hard, and instead of enabling them, it's actually hurting them. So I'm very excited that AI, RPA, some of these newer technologies can actually help us.
At the end of the day, the government workforce is really, I think, rich with people who have the ability to grow into this space. And I think it's just a matter of making sure people have the tools that they need to really learn and be empowered to get the skills to drive this forward. And that's really what the community of practice aims to do.
Hi, good morning. Welcome to our virtual event, The Future of RPA. I'm Amy Kluger, Managing Editor here at Government CIO Media and Research, the leading solutions resource in federal IT. As with all our events that you hopefully had the chance to experience before, especially in recent months, our team consistently provides context to federal agencies' efforts in adopting emerging technologies like RPA, such as demonstrating how these technologies can ensure making the best use of legacy systems or new systems, how they can empower the workforce, and also streamline processes around claims, customer service, and critical decision-making, for example. Today, you'll hear from leaders in this space who are solving the most complex problems around RPA, including those around privacy, ethics, and just getting started. Follow along with us on Twitter using the hashtag #DigitalCIO. You can also ask your own questions if you're viewing this on our website by entering one in the comment box below this video. We'll try to get to everyone. And before we kick off our first panel for bots for customer engagement, I'd like to thank our sponsors of this event, Visagi, OptumServe, Blue Prism, and Axiom. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll pass it off now to our first moderator of the morning to introduce her panel, Megha Chokshi.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Megha Chokshi, and I'm the Senior Vice President at Government CIO. Federal agencies are seeing an increasing volume of customers, and as a result, the efficiency and the quality of customer engagement is being tested like never before. This is also prompting agencies to explore more efficient ways to streamline their internal processes by combining technology and employees. RPA and AI can add real value to not only at an operational level, but also at a strategic level to make sure that agencies are meeting their priority goals. It also enables insights and trends that allow employees to take on more high-value work. Our panel today will be discussing ways to increase customer experience and employee engagement through the use of bots, AI, and RPA. Joining us today is Barbara Morton, who serves as the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer at VA's Veterans Experience Office. In this role, Barbara is responsible for building a lasting customer experience capability at VA and also sharing best practices across sister federal agencies. Barbara, always great to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Ranjiv Mittu is Chief of the Information Management and Decision Architecture Branch at the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory. He leads a multidisciplinary group of scientists and engineers that conduct research in visual analytics, human performance, decision support systems, and enterprise system development. That's a handful, Ranjeev, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thanks, Megan. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And last but not the least, Sudhir Goyal is a principal solution architect at OptumServe, the federal health services business of Optum and United Health Group. And Sudhir has supported several key government programs, including the federally funded healthcare exchanges that provides health insurance to over 20 million consumers. So welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for taking the time this morning to be with us. So Barbara, as always, I'm going to start with you. So RPA is a fairly new capability at VEO. So can you tell us a little bit on how VEO is basically utilizing RPA for increasing customer experience and engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. So great to be with you all virtually. And yeah, I mean, just a little bit about the Veterans Experience Office. So by way of background, we're a relatively new office. We were established in 2015. And one of our first portfolio areas that we developed was really leveraging real-time customer experience data, surveys, and analytics. And since that time, we've really built the capability to what it is today. One of the things that we initially knew that we wanted to focus on is getting away from sort of lagging indicators of experience and really coming up to speed to meet the expectations of veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors with what they experience outside of government, which is really giving real-time feedback. So when you get that real-time feedback, how do you process it? You can't do it manually. So the system that we've built, which is called V-Signals, Veteran Signals, is using an industry best-in-breed platform to gather those insights and data, and using AI, natural language processing, to be able to bubble up sentiment so folks and users can see what veterans are telling us and sentiments that they're offering us, to then translate those insights into action. So it really empowers us to focus on the right problems to solve for veterans based on their feedback, by culling out a lot of the manual work or the lagging indicators that historically government has depended on.
Thank you, Barbara. So Sudhir and Ranjeev, kind of segueing from what Barbara just mentioned about identifying the right problems and, how do you, get that to a problem solving stage. So from your perspective, how are you seeing RPA being used within workflows and processes within your organizations? So Ranjeev, for you from, your research capacity, and Sudhir, for you, from a industry perspective and the private sector.
Well, thanks for the question. So, NRL is primarily a research laboratory. So we end up doing research for various customers, whether they be government, other Navy, or even outside the other services like Army and Air Force. So we tend to tackle their problems more than we do our own sometimes. But, the way I kind of see this is, a lot of our systems just in the government, not just DoD, but in the federal government, they're quite old. They're legacy systems, and there are a lot of issues with these systems in terms of how to interface with them. You have all this evolving new technology now, cloud computing, AI, ML coming into the mix. How do you seamlessly integrate this into these legacy IT systems? I think it's a really, really hard problem to think about. I think first and foremost, we have to think about, how do we expand these systems? How do we open them more up a little bit? What are the costs to do that? From my experience, when I worked with other agencies, it was very difficult to get data out of these systems. Because they're closed systems. They have business analytic tools running on top of them, and there's no way to access the underlying database. So many times you end up doing what's called a web scraping. You have to basically download the web page and get the feed and information off the web page. And if the structure of the web page changes, well, your extraction of that data is not going to be any good. And all of the data anyway behind the scenes is entered manually. So there's no automation involved. So even if you can automate the extraction to some degree, the data that you get may not be reliable. So there are a lot of infrastructure problems that you have to deal with. And, I think from the government perspective, our first issue is going to be how do we tackle those most difficult problems?
Thank you, Ranjiv. Sudhir?
Yeah, just a quick introduction. Like OptumServe is a federal health services business of Optum and United Healthcare. So we have a huge commercial side as well as we have a very large federal health services business. So we utilize this from a lot of different perspectives. I mean, we work in the claims, we have insurance policies creation, and then supporting customer care, and then we have system integration, fraud prevention, etc. So we have a huge, wide area of system IT expertise where we need these robots. A challenge in the current environment is there's so many systems right now in play, and a lot of times those systems don't talk to each other. And then we have to provide customer care to it could be providers, it could be end user consumers, and all hospitals and other healthcare providers. So getting them the right information in a timely manner, and it's not necessarily just a cost perspective, but it's reducing the cycle time for our customer care representatives is kind of a huge challenge, so that they can quickly get the right information from the right place. So we utilize, we have almost like 500 robots right now running across these different workflow processes in the commercial area and federal businesses combined together. And another, another 500 to probably be developed in next couple of years. So we have a huge area, and almost like 60%, I would say, is towards the customer care. And, customer care, as I said, that, just getting the right information in a timely manner, and redirecting some of these chats, messages which come to us, extracting the right information and directing them to the right skill agents. I think those are some of the key areas, but we have system integration, connecting systems together and passing information together automatically instead of having some manual processes, etc. So there are multiple areas where we kind of work those things together.
Thank you.
If I could just add on top of that a little bit. So, that's exactly right on. I mean, I think about, the data channels that we open with surveys or with a new contact center. It's almost like you turn the faucet of information on, but if you don't have sort of the back end business processing and training and routing and integration and that infrastructure set up, you're going to run into a whole host of problems. So we knew that early on as well. And thankfully, we have an incredible team that works really closely across Veterans Health Administration and other members of the VA team that we serve to focus on those back-end business processes and that data integration, because you certainly don't want to have to sort of turn on a new capability just to have to, not have a place for it to go to be acted upon. There's nothing worse than having data and not acting upon it. So I think that can't be emphasized enough, that those back-end business processing, tweaks, changes, updates, knowledge management is so important, so important.
So it almost seems like we have to have a good balance between a system-to-system interaction and a customer or a human-to-system interaction. And once we have that right balance, and Ranjiv, to that point, this is something that we had discussed earlier in the week. This really kind of turns into a system engineering kind of a challenge, right? What's the right balance, and how do we get there?
Right. No, I think that's a very interesting question. Some of the biggest challenges that I've seen in not just building robotic process automation, but kind of taking that to a much more complex level, what I would term as workflow optimization, which takes RPA and looks at combining multiple constructs of RPA into a more elaborate workflow, and in which some of these singular RPAs may be very simple. Some may have very specific logic and AI, ML embedded in them. So there are going to be all kinds of branches, different conditions. And to me, that becomes the hardest problem, because when you start to solve for the end user the harder problems composed of these much more difficult and complex workflows, then I think you're going to see a lot more return on investment. I think you're already seeing a lot of ROI with just simple automation, but I think from a higher level of cognition, if you will, you're going to have more opportunity to take away those harder problems that require more cognitive thought and embed those in these more complex workflows. I think those are some of the biggest challenges. And also, there are two actually other things. One is developers. You need a workforce internally or that you can get on contract to be able to build you these workflows. You want to have some expertise in software development, machine learning, and all the necessary technologies to be able to do that. And lastly, probably the most important thing, like you mentioned, is a human systems integration. What is that user experience? Because we know all with AI ML, it's treated as a black box and you don't always know internally what it's doing. And you have to have some visibility into that black box to allow the user to have some acceptance on what they're seeing.
Sudhir, you wanted to add something earlier on?
I think just to add to what Ranjiv is saying it's about, learning curve, as you said, Ranjiv said, is kind of a big challenge, finding the right skill level sets and all that. Besides that, I think one other thing we are seeing is that finding the right type of processes to automate through these technologies. I think it's very important that selecting the right processes. Sometimes, if you don't select the right one, you may end up having some more manual processes, or maybe the technology is not able to support some of those complex things. So we kind of look at some of the repetitive tasks which are structured, and tasks that may be rule-based, or tasks that are have definitive output. So, we use some of the criteria. We use some of those things to kind of really carefully select only those processes which are going to give you the maximum ROI and has the best chance of success. So, that's the biggest challenge I see, is that there are a lot of things you can automate, but you need to really see what makes sense and from different perspectives.
Okay. And I can add to that too, just in terms of I know you mentioned earlier, Megha, the employee experience, right? So you have customer experience data, employee experience. I think the concept of upskilling is really, really important because as technology, helps us do our work more efficiently and takes away some of the manual steps that we traditionally have had to take for managing our individual portfolios. I mean, not everybody's a data scientist. I'm not a data scientist, right? But we need to be able to help our teams understand how to interpret data that is digested for them in these systems. And so I think empowering them with the right training, again, the right knowledge is a really, really important piece of that. We don't want to leave anybody behind, and we want to actually make sure that the technology can be utilized to its fullest by the employees.
Absolutely true. So, and today what's very interesting about a panel is we have representation from 3 distinct communities that basically are driving to the same purpose, right? Yeah. So you, Barbara, senior leadership focused on veteran engagement and customer engagement. Ranjiv, you are a research expert. Sudhir, you are a industry solutions, expert. So this next question is really I would like to get your unique perspective. Each government agency, and specifically I'm focusing this on government agencies right now, has a nuance on how it operates and what its customer base is. So from your perspective, what are the biggest challenges that are facing federal agencies in implementing RPA, AI, machine learning, natural language processing, all these new technologies? They're all buzzwords, but how is that making a difference? So Barbara, we can get started with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Happy to jump in here. So yeah, I think that it sort of hits on what we were talking about in terms of being able to leverage and take advantage of this new technology. I think one of the benefits, again, is sort of leaving behind some of the legacy ways of processing and legacy systems. But as was mentioned before, making that transition and bridging is a real challenge. So you can't just sort of drop the mic on your legacy system and process. You've got to be able to bridge it and transition and have a plan to do that. And frankly, from an employee perspective and a back-end business process perspective, have a clear communications and change management type of plan. Because I think we all conceptually can agree better technology is going to enable us as public servants and frankly, industry leaders as well to do better things. But it can't just be a light switch that you turn on. There's got to be some sort of transition process and plan to really kind of welcome everybody to step forward into this new space. So I think that's a critical component that really needs time and attention.
Ranjeev?
Yeah, so I think some of the ways that we're leveraging a lot of this new technology, not only the infrastructure components like cloud computing, distributed computing, service-oriented architectures, and AI ML, obviously. The way we're looking at it is, let's say for one of our customers, they were looking at how do you automate testing of large complex systems? And they were looking to perhaps buy a commercial product. And, everyone's got a different commercial product that is tailored uniquely to do very specific things. And it requires modifications to do more broader things. So we did a state-of-the-art survey and we looked at what's out there, and we ended up developing our own system, but with the understanding that it should be an open system. Mm-hmm. It should interface via standards with all the major vendors that do things like test automation. And the biggest thing I think is it should allow someone who's not too skilled in programming to be able to build the underlying software agents, if you will, the AI ML, with template-based authoring, for example. You give them nuggets of code and they build on top of it, and they share, and basically they're building the workflows and saving them off and reusing them. So it's very composable in that sense. And so it doesn't require a lot of end user expertise, because that to us was the biggest concern. When you look at some of our customers, they don't want to spend time programming. They're people they're war fighters. They're people out there that have to really kind of operate in the field and conduct operation. They're not going to be programming, and they're not going to have close to the battlefield. So, these are things we really have to take into consideration. These are harsh environments. And so you have to have something that allows them to seamlessly work in these environments, to develop and adapt in these environments.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting point, Ranjeev. So Sudhir, from your perspective, industry lessons learned, what's the biggest challenge?
Well, yeah, I don't know if I might go a little bit sideways, but, obviously one of the biggest challenges right now is cloud, right? Everyone wants to move to the cloud, and we are doing it on multiple programs. Our program in old times, it was so hard to scale up. I mean, with the new technologies coming and with the volume continuously changing, it wasn't very easy to kind of service new clients, more clients, taking a higher volume, like for COVID-19 or some other things in the existing legacy systems. So moving to the cloud, I think, is one of the biggest challenge right now. And RPA, obviously tries to assist in kind of in the transition phase. You can connect different technologies together. But yeah, leveraging cloud, how do you leverage cloud while you have legacies? You have to maintain legacy systems, and you have huge amount of data there, stored processes. How do you replicate into a new system? It's not just lift and shift, it's also how you actually optimize for cloud use. If you just do lift and shift, you probably won't be able to completely optimize the cost, performance, etc. So I think I see that's the biggest challenge. And we are doing it on multiple programs for CMS right now. We have done a couple of them. So yeah, taking the lessons learned from there. How do you, those are extensive set of lessons learned, and the processes, establishing a good transition plan. I think Barbara also mentioned that. So, those are some of the key things. And funding in government is always a challenge. That how do you kind of maintain two fundings together? That's a challenge you have to work out, optimize. I'm sure Barbara is aware of that particular challenge. So, yeah, those are some of the biggest challenges I see in this area.
So there you brought up COVID-19, and this question invariably comes up across every panel that I'm on, right? So from your perspective, and this question is for Ranjiv and Sudhir, and then Barbara, I have a very specific VA-related question for you. But from your perspective, how are you seeing your customers, embracing RPA for the COVID response?
If I were to go first, yeah, I mean, it's built in most of our program. We are working on Operation Warp Speed. We got a pretty sizable contract. And so we have this large number of robots, and, customer care is kind of most important thing here, responding to calls and all that. So we have a large number of robots actually there. So it's not directly deployed, but internally all our processes, we're going to select those appropriate robots which we can reuse in those places to answer customer calls or direct them into the right place, etc., or perform some repeatable tasks through those robots.
Thank you.
Yeah, our customers, so one of the things, as I stated, we're supporting one of our customers in automating the testing of large-scale enterprise systems. And we found that the technology we've provided to them allows them to do that. So it connects up not only government agencies, it will link up government with industry, also FFRDCs, and it's all kind of cloud-based, server-based, so everyone can virtually connect up to a DevOps environment, develop their test automation software, their suite of testing they want to do, compose it how they want to do, and insert the new code they want to test. And everything is logged, automated, and those log files can be automatically analyzed for performance issues. So, if we're looking at, let's say, how much throughput is from system A to system B from, somewhere in the US to, let's say, overseas, okay, you're dealing with multiple communication points. You can start to log that information. You can see how well the software that you built is operating in that deployed environment, because you're testing it. You've instrumented the real system, if you will. The real system is instrumented. So you have a lot of opportunity to catch these nuances and understand them, because you have the power of data analytics now. Big data is not an issue anymore. You can look for patterns and anomalies, and it allows improvements in the software to roll out faster. So it really is a game-changing technology. There's just so much out there that you can integrate with. As long as you adhere to open standards, it just opens up a wide array of capabilities to you. So
that's very interesting. And Ranjiv, you and I had talked about data and how data can be so useful. And Barbara, to that point, we had talked about earlier about, the data mining as well. So, in March, VA had to pivot to meet its fourth mission. Yes. And that in itself was challenge number one. So how has VA utilized, or has it leveraged RPA to specifically meet its fourth mission?
So, I mean, our fourth mission, for folks who may not be aware, we're here to sort of back up the country, honestly, in a medical sense, when there are any sort of natural disasters, or, in the case of COVID, obviously, having this nationwide crisis that we're undergoing. So, we did sort of immediately want to make sure that we were continuing our survey capabilities just to see how veterans were feeling. And as a reminder, we use sort of Likert scale questions 1 to 5, and also have free text boxes. And we promptly also worked with the Veterans Health Administration to roll out a COVID-19 survey as well, to really kind of understand, how veterans in general were feeling in light of the pandemic, and kind of the shift from, a lot of in-person visits to healthcare, telehealth in particular. So in terms of the fourth mission, I mean, we haven't sort of done any sort of survey related work specifically with respect to that, but I can tell you that in April, actually, when we got our third quarter results from veterans and those that use VA, asking them, hey, do you trust VA to fulfill its commitment to veterans? Did you find your interaction, easy, effective, emotionally resonant? We hit our highest scores ever at that point with 80% trust. It certainly is wavered a little bit in Q4 and the results that we're kind of processing now. But I think it's really a testament to how our employees have really stepped up and tried to accommodate, leading with empathy in the space in light of COVID. I mean, it's just been such an adjustment for everybody in that way.
Yes, and I'm sure, as everyone can attest, everyone would like to see the end of COVID, and let's just move on. So going back to something that we talked about earlier, the human to human and computer to human interaction, we do have a question from the audience. Many times human interactions involve emotions and things like sarcasm. So how does somebody or a system actually evaluate, how would you, from your perspective, how would you evaluate the current state of AI that accounts for such factors, such emotions? And Ranjiv, to this question, you and I discussed the HR angle, just earlier in the week on, how do you take an RPA workflow, bots, and kind of apply it for an HR workflow? So I would be really interested, to start with you to kind of get an answer on this one. Yeah.
Was your first question talking about how would you recognize sarcasm?
Yes, okay. Sarcasm. That's correct.
That is a very, very difficult problem. I think just the field of AI, deep learning, it's so much in its infancy that getting to human level understanding and recognition, we're far from that. I think there's some very fundamental problems that need to be addressed and solved in AI. But to your point about how we can start using it for practical problems, industry is doing this now. They're applying things like chatbots to do virtual interviews. They're looking at natural language processing and simple things like keyword searching to scan thousands of resumes to do the initial level of filtering. That's already happening. But, I think the real benefit would come from after people are employed, after you actually get employed, because it becomes an issue about retention then. And I think the key there is that, if you have a way to collect data from employees during the course of their career, barring any privacy issues, those are always issue with PII data and people. If you have such an ability to do surveys periodically with your employees and catch data, you have a lot of demographic data, you might see patterns evolving across an organization or broadly across agencies that you can try to fix before it might lead to someone actually leaving, because when these things happen, you tend to see people leave. And so you might be able to intervene very early on to fix these problems or make it better in some way that in the future you have less people leaving. Mm-hmm. So I think there are real opportunities, and we ought to be at least trying to implement prototypes in the government.
Barbara, any thoughts?
I mean, not much to add on that. I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. One thing I will add, though, I know we're talking a lot about sort of AI and bots and things like that. And one of the things that I do sort of invite us to all balance that with is that sort of human to human connection. So one of the kind of areas of portfolio that we manage at VEO, of course, is a human-centered design practice. Now with COVID, we've been able to switch that practice to virtual, right? And sort of, by video, but it still is that human to human sort of intelligence gathering that so far we have not figured out how bots can do that. And so I think having a balance and having the best of both of those worlds, blending them and melding them to be able to kind of create tangible solutions to empower employees to deliver better experiences, to give our customers better experiences, I think is sort of where the magic is these days.
Yep, agree with you. And so there this is, my last question. We are towards the end of our panel. So you were instrumental in also pulling together a customer service center, I believe at the IRS. So from your angle, is there anything else that we should be looking out for when we are using AI to increase customer engagement?
Yeah, I mean, we look at it. Customer just like a little bit tied to the previous question as well. I mean, our goal is not really to completely eliminate human-to-human interaction. I mean, what we are trying to do is more intelligently serve them.
Yeah.
By reducing the call time, using, of course, AI, ML, machine language to kind of more try to solve. I mean, if we get some emails or chats, so we have some ways to kind of extract information and try to understand the problem before actually it gets to do an agent. So that agent is, I mean, because there's so many wide variety of problems we face, the customers face. I mean, it could be any areas of our business. So it's important that when we get the human-to-human interface connected, that they have a good understanding of what the problem might be, and on what type of information, what computer system we need to, the CSR has to access, representative have to access to kind of serve them better in the most efficient way and the fastest manner. So, a lot of our bots are in that kind of respect, leveraging the technology to kind of understand the needs of that particular customer as best as possible. Voicemail is one thing. I mean, you have a voicemail of your chats, or if you have emails. So, I mean, there's enough information out there to be able to extract some key things and direct them to the right place, and that person also who's serving them is able to have the right data access in front of them. So that's the way we look at it from the RPA perspective. And
Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you. So I think we all agree that, if implemented correctly, RPA bots can definitely increase employee engagement and in return kind of improve the customer experience too. So thank you all very much. I really, really enjoyed our discussion today, and I'm actually looking forward to continuing this discussion in the future, because I can bet that if we were to have the same panel next year, we would be talking of a lot of different things with many more advancements. So, in the spirit of that, I'm going to hand over the next panel to my colleague, Jason Chong, and he is going to be talking about automation for improved business functions. So Jason, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Hello and welcome to the session, Automation for Improved Business Functions. My name is Jason Chong. I am the Director of Data Strategy and Analytics at Government CIO, and I will be the moderator. In this session, we have invited 3 guests to discuss robotics process automation and how it is being applied to improve business functions. For example, RPA can help reduce administrative burden, increase workforce productivity, improve the accuracy and quality of work outputs and other functions. So guest number 1 is Sheila Conley. Sheila, can you please say hi?
Good morning. Happy to be with you.
Great. Sheila is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Finance at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Sheila is HHS Deputy Chief Financial Officer and is responsible for providing strategic leadership to the department's financial management, program integrity, and enterprise risk management programs. Guest number 2 is James Gregory.
Hi, Jason. Thank you for having me.
James is the Robotic Process Automation Program Director at the U.S. General Services Administration, where he leads RPA development teams. In his current role, he is focused on integrating and championing RPA at the GSA and empowering the entire workforce to look for and pursue opportunities for efficiency. Thirdly, our guest number 3 is Drew Yanig. Drew, can you please?
Jason, glad to be here. How are you doing?
Drew is the industry practice leader at Bizagi. He has over 27 years of management and supervisory experience. He is a domain expert in public and private sectors in the areas of process improvement and customer experience. He has managed large global staff for the Department of Defense and is now with Bizagi. So thank you everybody for joining the panel. I would like to start off this question with you, Drew. And it's in general, RPA has broken barriers to facilitate more effective workplace operations and functions. And this includes things such as improving the accuracy, quality of work products, productivity increases in the workforce, and also reducing administrative burden. Since you have a lot of private sector experience, could you give us a general sense of how this industry is accepting of RPA and how these barriers are being broken that previously were there before? If you could elaborate on that, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. RPA is kind of it's still kind of early yet, but I think it has the potential to do for the workplace what the Industrial Revolution did for factories. That can be a bit of a daunting statement, but it certainly is something that changes kind of the balance of the tasks that we perform in the day-to-day office environment with regards to processing and handling, everything from loan applications to case management, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, with the advent of digital process automation and artificial intelligence, you really kind of see hyper automation starting to take effect as well, where, the AI is starting to influence the bots on how to process things really quickly. It's interesting how it's kind of being picked up. In some cases, it's being picked up quite readily and enthusiastically, as most of the panel members that are here today. In other cases, there's some reticence associated with it, and some of that is kind of myth-based. But certainly, it's helping large-scale institutions with response times, fraud detections, and the ability to create audit trails, as well as realigning workforce to do things probably better skilled for their human aspect, meaning requiring more thought, more knowledge worker type interactions. So it can be a true watershed event, pushing kind of the workforce in a different direction and what we do in the workplace in a completely different direction than what we're used to. So that's kind of why I compare it to kind of like the Industrial Revolution. But it's interesting to see where it's being picked up and where people are kind of watching to see what happens next.
Completely agree. It's truly fascinating. And your analogy to Industrial Revolution, I think, is spot on. So James, what are your thoughts on how RPA has broken barriers?
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Drew had to say. I totally agree, right? For example, at GSA, we started the RPA program in the CFO's office, and based on our success, we started developing automations not just for financial operations, but for a larger GSA. So we developed automation for almost every organization. And the biggest value that we are able to provide is the ability to provide additional capacity, right? So many of the organizations we work with, including our own, come to us with capacity challenges where they have the right people, just not enough, or the process is too daunting for any one group or one individual to accomplish. So they engage with us and we develop automation help. And I'll give you an example. Right? So for one, there's automation we built, is the 889 contract mod. And basically, there was a FAR ruling change that prohibited the use of certain technologies from contracts. To address that at GSA, we had 8,000 contracts that had these technologies, and we had to modify every contract to eliminate the discontinue using those technologies. So we estimate initially for one person to make one contract mod, it took an hour, but through our automation, we were able to do it in 10 minutes. So you go from doing one contract mod in 1 hour to 6 an hour. That's a significant change and definitely help them accomplish their goal of making all the contract mods to 8,000 contracts. So in terms of what capability and capacity benefit it provides to organization challenges, it's really, for us, it's a lot about how to address capacity needs and making organizations more efficient.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear that RPA is impacting your organization in such a positive way. Sheila, could you please comment on how RPA has broken barriers to facilitate more effective workplace operations and functions?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And Drew, I agree with you. I think this does have the potential to be much like the Industrial Revolution and the impact that had on the country and the world, really. And I remember back in those days, that was a long time ago, but that work was really hard. It's how long I've been in this space, pretty much. It seems like But the opportunity here through this kind of automation is it's really limitless. As I'm the Deputy Secretary for the department, and we have 12 very large organizations that do operations, financial and otherwise, and run programs. Many times they are done very differently within those organizations and across our department. And so the challenge for us at this point is not so much adopting the technology or the concept of RPA, but it's where can we apply it to get the greatest benefit and opportunity. And over the years, as things are done in fairly non-standard ways, they become far more cumbersome, less effective, and we have, so it's hard to even pinpoint opportunities here at the department because there are just so many. It's our challenge is where do we want to focus our energies and trying to then extrapolate the benefits that we get from those and share those across the portfolio so that folks are realizing them. I will share with you one, we have many examples and how those opportunities come to light. Usually are the things that the staff hate doing the most. They bring up because they're cumbersome, time consuming, and frustrated. And people want to work on more interesting, more analytical areas that have greater impact, not just to our finance portfolio. Of course, that's near and dear to me, but we in finance are really in a mission support function. So we want to be able to provide analytic information and insights to our program people to help them run our programs better that then allow us to accomplish our mission. I will give you one example of an area where at our Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, they run very large programs, and a big part of Medicare and cascading down to the Medicaid program is ensuring appropriate provider enrollment, that the providers that are carrying out healthcare services are indeed the entities that need to be registered, that need to meet certain eligibility requirements, and have a lot of information that needs to be accurate and timely. And so we've been applying RPA to the enrollment process across the country and realizing some very impressive results there through the enrollment process using RPA. We can validate provider information and bump that information, the registration information, against other databases maintained by GSA or our Inspector General's office and a variety of other places. And just to give you a quick snippet of some of the results we're seeing, whereas it used to take months for over a 3-month period in some cases to enroll providers, that's now being reduced down to 10 to 15 days in some instances. So the impact, the benefit is really transformational. And again, having direct programmatic impact in terms of the assurances this provides to our overall program, the providers being enrolled.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you very much, Sheila, for the insights. James, you did mention capacity as the area where your focus is. Would you say that that's where you feel that it provides most value? Are there any other areas that you're touching upon or plan to that you think RPA would provide a lot of value for your organization?
Capacity is just one of the units of measure that we kind of use to kind of measure the impact of an automation. But there's a ton of them. The additional efficiency, less correct data errors, make it more accurate, less people, faster. I mean, there's a lot of different metrics, but the capacity one is the one that we use to kind of measure the impact of the automation, right? Because we kind of, at GSA, one of the things that we try to do is to develop automation that make the end technician more productive in their roles. So that, as Sheila was saying, to do more meaningful and impactful work, right? It's all about, quality of life, even within the working environment, right? You got to enjoy what you're doing, right? If you have to do a task that's kind of monotonous and, stressful just because not because it's hard, just because you have a whole bunch. That takes away from the not enjoyment, but the desire for doing that work.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Drew, since you have a lot of experience across the private sector and you're working with clients and customers from a wide breadth of sectors, what is your feeling in general across the board where RPA seems to provide the most value for your clients?
I was actually laughing when Sheila was talking earlier about I love the metric of the thing that the employees hate doing the most. That was classic. But yeah, James's point is also well taken. And so typically when we're engaging with clients and working for like RPA and digital automation or hyper automation stuff, it's often a conversation about, where can you get your ROI or your ROV fastest, right? And so sometimes it's a capacity conversation. Sometimes that's a costing conversation. And sometimes it probably may even, come down to where employees actually are trying to do processes they hate the most. I mean, but for an example, there was a client that we helped with our partner, Blue Prism. And, being able to take like application processing and we decreased the onboarding time by 85%, right? Something that went from 56 days to 9 days. That's like, huge from a customer experience perspective. And so, that's kind of a conversation that we have with our clients when we're going through these types of things is, where is your biggest pain points? Where do you need the most help with? And, in that particular process, for example, 50% of the applications are now touched by digital workers, which means that 50% of those things do not need to actually be touched by humans at all, and those humans now can go on and do better things with their times involving the cognitive thinking that they have available, and that actually improves morale and it improves their job prospects and improves their resume.
Fantastic. So touching upon what you just said a little earlier, how would you define success in your sense for RPAs for your clients and customers? Obviously, you want them to be successful with setting up RPA, but if you were to try to measure that success, what would you think? That it's a broad question because I guess there's so many applications, but in general, what do you look for the signs of success when you're looking at your clients and implementing RPA?
Well, I mean, certainly from our perspective, client success means is the client happy, right? Which means from their success, are they achieving their goals that they're trying to set out for themselves? So, and that ranges. Some cases it's about money. In the federal sector, though, it's more often than not because after years and years of do more with less, do more with less, do more with less, it's about the ability to free up that manpower to do other things and not be, clogged up trying to do kind of manual, repetitive, essentially factory work labor in the office place. And of course, then there's also the return. We go back to our first conversation about customer experience, right? I mean, we saw this going on in like the Small Business Administration during the current crisis. Initially it was very frustrating because the Small Business Administration really wasn't set to handle a crisis this size. And so they had to do some quick thinking and some quick turnaround in order to be able to actually automate those processes to process those types of claims and applications in a fast fashion to serve the constituency.
All right. Oh, fantastic. Great insights. Thank you, Drew. James, could you please share on what defines success within your organization? I understand that you want to relieve capacity constraints and such, but what can you elaborate on that a bit more to understand how, like, if you have target goals or whatnot?
Sure, absolutely. So actually, there's two metrics that I really go by. First one's a little tongue in cheek, right? And it kind of mirrors to what Drew had to say, right? If my customers are happy after I deliver an automation and want another one, that's a pretty good indicator that I did something good and they see value, want me to repeat that function capability for them. That's kind of the easy metric. But internally within GSA, right, we have a metric that every automation we build, we target it to generate about 2,000 hours of capacity, basically one FTE. And that's our goal, right? So when we have the initial conversation about should we invest the development time to develop this automation, will it generate the benefit, right? Has it at least recover at least one person? Optimally, it'd be multiple people or more, right? So that's kind of the metric we use, and that's kind of actually how we justify the program, right? So basically, we have over 72 automation in production. They all generate I'm just going to say more than 2,000 hours each, so it's a pretty big metric. But that's how we're able to justify the existence of the system and add value to what we do. And it's pretty tough to argue against a program that generates that much value with so little investment. I mean, it's a very inverse ratio in terms of investment to benefit. Insignificant.
Absolutely. I cannot agree with you more. So Sheila, from a chief financial officer's perspective, I think this is a great question for you because success and ROI are at the heart of everything that moves forward from the CFO's eyes. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you define success and what you look for when you say yay or nay to an RPA initiative that's being proposed.
Well, I will tell you, because I'm not, a technologist, but I love them, and I'm glad that we have a lot of really good ones. But I'm more, looking at things from the business perspective. And so when we're looking at application of RPA, of course, we would expect the efficiencies and the value, but even backing up before we take on a project to implement robotics or RPA, we get benefit on the front end, which is it does cause us to look at reassess our business processes. And to the extent they are non-standard and 1,000 flowers bloom, it causes us to go back and identify what are the key process, what's the key process, what are the key steps. Have we been missing something that creates risk and vulnerability for us? In our case, it could be risk of fraud or risk of a variety of things. So we get, first and foremost, the benefit of reassessing our business processes that are key. And then as we go through and apply RPA, then we would look at the more traditional metrics that I think everybody would look at in terms of monetary, the time it takes, labor hour reduction, customer satisfaction, but also the cost to implement. And I would say we're at the beginning, in a very general sense, focusing on those types of metrics that are quantitative and fairly straightforward. But we want to then evolve into what is the impact of this work on, as I mentioned before, on our programs as well as on our workforce and customers. So, so we're at the beginning stage, and we're in the efficiencies and monetary, benefit at this stage in the game. But we're looking at this to be a springboard onto more outcome and qualitative measurements going forward.
Okay, I think that's fantastic. And of course, at the end of the day, I think we'll have to look at it from an outcome perspective. And I'm sure as RPA becomes more mainstream, there's going to be a need to prioritize, and everyone's going to want it. And how do you decide on the initiatives that most make sense? I think that will be a challenge in itself. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. So moving into a very difficult question and topic, an elephant in the room, so to speak. We know that RPA, in some sense, is a very sensitive topic to many. The topic of job loss almost always accompanies automation. And so how do you see RPA impacting the job market? Do you feel that it will negatively or positively impact the workforce? If so, how? I think we've gotten some ideas based on the conversations we already have. But I'd love to hear to start off with you, Sheila, to hear your thoughts on that matter.
Sure. And I think it is an important consideration as we're moving through and increasing the degree of automation. We always have to think about our workforce. I think in the federal environment, and I think this is cascading through to states, local governments, et cetera, those in the public sector, we have constrained resources, and so we have to make the very best use of the resources that we are entrusted with. You hear a lot about workforce engagement, and our jobs is one of the key things that we do as leaders is trying to, get them improve employee engagement so that We create positive professional working environments that benefit the organization as well as the individuals that work here. In this space, I think one of the key aspects of taking on initiatives like many of these is trying to engage the workforce from the very beginning, because again, it is our workforce that knows the operational aspects of many of the things that we do. They know the things that are most inefficient, that are most challenging. Many people just don't feel good about that, but they love when we do the surveys about about workforce engagement. Most of our folks really want to identify those things that they can improve, and they see opportunities, and they get very frustrated when they don't have the opportunity to improve things. Bringing the workforce into the picture and engaging them on the front end of these kinds of initiatives is hugely important. It really increases the success all the way through. Really in a big picture, this is all about change management. And we do customer-centered design types of things. This is really workforce-centered design. They bring great ideas and great issues to the table and then help us work through them. You can't back into buy-in. It's not like we work it through and then we tell everybody, here's the manual, you're going to do it this way now. You have to be part of that from the very beginning. It's very positive, mutually reinforcing positive impacts on organizations. We've generated a lot of successful outcomes and engagement as a result of taking that approach.
Oh, I think that's absolutely wonderful to hear. James, is there anything that you would like to add in terms of how you feel RPA impacting job market, and whether it's negative or positive to the workforce? Oh, James, you're on.
I'll figure this out eventually, right? So sorry about that. So actually, at GSA, I think we locally at GSA, I think we have experienced the opposite, right? Because of the additional capacity that we're able to generate, some of the organizations we work with are able to take on a new scope which they weren't able to do before, or take on refocus on new capability. For example, we developed an automation in one of our contracting partners that are in GSA, and because of the efficiency that we are able to provide, they are able to invest more time and money and resources into customer service and customer relationship building, right? So that so I don't see it negatively affecting the organization, at least at GSA. I see it really as providing opportunities to kind of expand capability, increase customer service in areas like that. So, so knock on wood, I hope that continues to be the experience. But in terms of job loss or anything like that, I have not experienced or believe GSA experienced anything like that.
Oh, that's great insights into the public sector. And then Drew, I think the big question is the private sector, right? If you're thinking about RPA, I think in the private sector, there's a lot of concern for automation. Jobs are not secure, especially in this environment. Do you see RPA impacting the job market, both in a negative or a positive way? What do you think that this means for the workforce? What's your perception in general across the board when you're going into your client site on what the workforce feels when you come into play and try to implement RPA? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Right. So we kind of divide this into two pieces. Certainly RPA, digital process automation, hyperautomation, and if you go even like one step further, Industry 4.0 is going to change the job market. It's going to change it, right? Now, whether or not it's adversely is somewhat kind of the crux of the argument. There are people that are convinced it's the boogeyman, it's going to result in thousands of job losses, et cetera, et cetera. The reality, what we're seeing on the ground, is actually somewhat different than that. It's that people are having to be retooled, retrained, and reshifted to do other things. Now, is it true there are some people that are unwilling to change, unwilling to shift with the workforce change? Yeah, that's true. But this is very much like the first industrial revolution, right? When we went through that, where essentially workforce shift did occur. Are there some people that probably get left out of the cold of that? Yeah, it probably happens here and there, but generally speaking, it's not because jobs went away. It's because jobs changed. And that's probably the most important aspect of this. So when we talk to clients and we're going through this, and Sheila kind of alluded to this earlier, organizational change management is key, right? Get your folks involved early, right? The folks that actually are doing this process today, get them involved with it, help them shape their future together with the process. They're often, if you do it right, they're going to get excited because they know that they're going to be doing maybe not the tasks that Shirley mentioned that they hate anymore. They're going to do something maybe more productive, something that takes more intelligence. They might even get some additional training depending upon their new role. So it can be a net plus. We have seen some clients manage this differently, whether it's solely after reduction in force. And if you're going after reduction in force because you want to save money, there are also ways to do that without impacting the people involved. And what we do in those particular cases, and I've done this in 3 different organizations, 3 different times, is that, let's say you no longer need, 15 people out of 500 or something, right? Because you've gotten that much reduction in efficiencies and you've realigned workforce. Those kinds of things can be managed through attrition rather than actual job losses, right? And that requires some creative thinking up front, and you can go through those pieces. But we're proud to say that, most of the projects that I've ever been involved with, no one has lost their job. It's all been retooling, retraining, and getting people involved in other sectors.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. So that being said, moving on to the next question, Drew, and piggybacking off of what you just mentioned, how do you feel that the workforce, I think you've done a great job explaining what you do to mitigate some concerns there, but there's general public concerns on automation and perception, and that might pose a risk to the industry. So what are your thoughts on what we could do to have more effective communication with the public in order to create this perception that RPA is the future? This is not as harmful as everyone thinks it to be.
Well, it's certainly, dispelling the myths is probably one of the key things. But that's always been a challenge with any automation, that's happened throughout history, is that there are certain folks that try to demonize the forward momentum. And the reality, is different than that. And so certainly education of the workforce on what RPA and what hyperautomation means to them specifically is probably key to getting them on board and getting them to understand what happens, because they've heard the rumors, they've heard the demonization. And so if you can get them kind of involved early and educate them on what RPA is and what it isn't, you may find that they feel a bit differently about it once they're fully informed. The general public, a lot of them really don't understand. They hear about the rise of the bots, right? And they hear about RPAs coming to take your job and things like that. But they really don't actually hear much about the actual success stories and what companies have actually done with that set of tools, and how, in many cases, increased productivity is actually created, a situation where all ships rise, right? And there's actually more jobs being created as a result of that. That story is not as well told, and that's a story that needs to be gotten out into the environment more often, so that people kind of understand that actually this progress can be a good thing if managed correctly. But like any organizational change, if managed incorrectly, it could go badly for you. But if you need help with that, I'm sure the 3 of us can point you in different directions of people who know how to do this correctly.
Well, Drew, it's really great to hear, and we hope you have continued success with communicating. I'm sure that with these type of positive aspects of RPA to the public and with Bizagi. So James, what are your thoughts on how you feel we can mitigate some of these public concerns on automation? James.
3 times the charm. All right. I definitely on the same page with Drew on that. Definitely agree with a lot of what he said. Right. So for us, in terms of every automation we build has a mini change management program involved, right? And first part of it is education and communication, making sure that all our end users and the larger the GSA community understand what we plan on accomplishing with the automation, and just making sure we have effective communications, kind of capturing all that and sharing that information. Part two is transparency, right? I mean, we're very open with, all the documentation we develop for our automations. We're very open and transparent about its intent and what it's going to impact. So that, that kind of gives some of the end users and the people that are indirectly impacted some visibility and some comfort in terms of what the end goal of the automation is. And then the last part is capacity planning, right? One of the questions we ask with every automation, what do you plan on doing with this excess capacity, right? It gets the senior leaders thinking about, retooling the workforce, taking on more functionality in terms of the workload, taking on different type of workload. So it's a lot of it's really based around kind of emphasizing change management at a very granular level, making sure that everybody's aware of all of the aspects of the automation, so they can so it can be more widely accepted, right? So that's the biggest thing for us in terms of what we do with every automation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the insights, James. Sheila, what are your thoughts on how you can mitigate public concerns? It's a tough thing in being both the financial role and also trying to understand the impact that it might have, just the impact that RPAs might have in terms of perception across the board. But love to hear your thoughts. If you can share.
Yeah, I was just thinking as I was listening to Drew and the public, I think you might have referred to bureaucratic, which of course we usually call people, the public feels bureaucrats, and I fears bureaucrats, but I was just thinking now they can feel botocrats. We have to work on our image, obviously, and there are some preconceived notions about, how the federal government does things and people in the public sector. I think actually moving into, we strive in the financial management community of CFOs to demonstrate that we are good public stewards and accountable for taxpayer dollars. And to me, I think we have greater challenges with the workforce and the application of bots than we do with the public perception, because I think this improves efficiencies, and we see the results. They're exponentially more impressive in terms of the reduction of time that government to citizen transactions take. We can reduce risk of fraud. We can improve the effectiveness of our programs, but it has to be managed. The message has to be conveyed in a way so that folks understand these are programs that are carefully controlled, well thought out, targeted, and have a return on the investment, and that investment benefits the American taxpayer. So I actually think we have a great opportunity there. I think we also, to message this in a way that would be impressive and important to the citizenry writ large. I also think it's important from a workforce development perspective that, right now, fewer young people are coming into the federal government than ever before, and the numbers are not good at the entry levels. We need to make the federal government an attractive place to work. And folks knowing, coming in, working with this kinds of technology, these tools, and having an opportunity for continuous improvement, that draws the kinds of folks that we will need in the future to carry out our programs in a way that is both professionally competent, accountable, and professionally gratifying to those who want to come to work. It's a great place to work. And so I think this helps with our recruitment and engagement.
Fantastic. Great insights. Thank you very much, Sheila. So we're going to take an audience question, and I think this seems pretty good in terms of all the things that we've discussed. What does government need to do to ramp up adoption of RPA? Is there anything specific that you would recommend? And love to start with you, Drew, on that, and hear your thoughts from a private sector perspective. If there's anything that we haven't discussed, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
Well, RPA in government has actually been kind of interesting to see how and where it's being picked up. And, I think if we're going to try to ramp up use in the federal space, one of the issues that I keep seeing over and over again, weirdly enough, is trust. and that's related to the actual platform itself. It comes up in multiple conversations with clients that aren't doing it today, but are considering doing it. And they start to worry about what is the bot doing? Can they see the internal machinations? Is it auditable? And in some cases, they have heard kind of myths and stories, and there's a level of distrust going on in this space. And I think to try to help with the acceptance of that, they need to understand that they're actually FedRAMP approved tools to do this. There have been security reviews of doing this, that the building of a bot is a fully auditable thing, right? So it's almost like there's this misconception, I don't know if it's quite so bad as saying Skynet, but it's like, oh my God, the bots are coming. How do I track what the bot is doing? It's like, you're building the bot, you're telling it what to do. It really doesn't, it's not thinking on its own. It's following instructions and processing things you're supposed to process. And it's very secure. We have, in the commercial side, most of our customers are financial, actually, banks and wealth management and insurance companies. And they use this routinely. And it's a very secure mechanism. But there is a lot of misconceptions out there about what the bot is and what isn't. And I think that means we have more on the education front to do.
Oh, fantastic. Well, James, what are your thoughts on how we can accelerate adoption within the government for RPA? Is there anything that you think you could add to what we haven't discussed already?
Sure, yeah. So I'm part of the GSA set up the RPA community of practice, and that's just a kind of forum where we can share information about RPA technology, and that's a good tool, a good program to kind of learn more about RPA. We also collaborate and help each other out, share information and support each other. So that's a good place to learn. Internally within every organization, one of the things that we're finding is if you want to start any type of RPA capability, you got to start with your IT organization. Make sure you align with them. They're going to walk you through the process of how to get software approved on the software list, how to get installed on your desktop, how to run it safely on your laptop, and then all the governance controls around that, right? And then after you go from the pilot stage, the challenge from going to the pilot stage, getting more adoption is, what we're finding is the more successful programs have internal champions at the senior level who recognize the value of RPA and want to sponsor, kind of incorporating that capability into the organization. We find that that level of support, gets the attention and also provides some of the funding. Obviously, there's always a funding element as well, but it kind of gets the ball rolling in terms of getting adopted in the organization. And then the last part is just, as it gets more and more adopted into your organization, a key thing is to make sure that there's some type of education awareness program about RPA and RPA technology. So at the grassroots level, people who are doing those mundane tasks, or like Sheila says, tasks they don't want to do, they know they have a venue where there's a solution out there that can help address that, right? So that grassroots fundamental understanding of the RPA capability technology is key. So if you do those three things, it's a good way to kind of get RPA going in your organization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to dogpile on what James has said, because he mentioned something. GSA's got this group that's doing this work out there. There are other governmental groups that are doing exploratory work with RPA as well, helping government entities. Like there's a group that's coming out of NASA. There's a DoD group as well. So if you're on the government side and you don't understand or you want to know more about RPA, get involved. Go out there and get in those groups. So I really want to dogpile on what James just said.
Fantastic. Sheila, I'd love to go and get see your opinion and have a conversation, but unfortunately right now we are out of time, so I hope you understand it. So Sheila, James, and Drew, I want to say that it was an honor to have such esteemed guests for this session. GCIO, the audience, and I really appreciate your time, insights, and thought leadership on the topic of automation for improved business functions. That concludes the second session on Future of RPA. We would now like to transition to the next session, which is RPA for National Security, which will be moderated by our Senior Vice President, Ryan Elliott. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Jason Sean, for that introduction and awesome panel. Really enjoyed that interaction. And we're now scheduled for the last panel of the event today, which is, as Jason mentioned, the focus on national security. And particularly RPA has shown considerable agencies. Areas of national security and defense have begun exploring RPA to streamline information management and critical decision making. Some agencies have already dipped their toe in the water, and others are becoming fully immersed in this RPA area of the future. So today, for our panel, we're going to hear from a very experienced defense-minded group of government executives and also from industry about what they are focused on related to RPA, what they're seeing, what the trends look like that support automation technologies, that support the workforce and improve process efficiencies. So just before we jump right into the questions, I want to briefly introduce the members of our panel. We first have Erica Thomas, who is the RPA Program Manager for the Office of Secretary of Defense Comptroller. She is currently leading RPA initiatives in this particular area of the government. She co-leads the DoD's RPA consortium. And outside of DoD, she's an active champion for the federal RPA community of practice. And she co-led the use case, process selection, and automation sharing practice area. So welcome, Erica.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Ravi Thayagarayan, who is a science and technology acquisition professional and portfolio director for Army Futures Command, Department of Science and Technology Integration based in Austin, Texas. Prior to Ravi's role, his current role, his most recent assignments were as the senior technical expert in materials and product lifecycle engineering at the U.S. Army Tank Automotive R&D Engineering Center, TARDEC, now the Ground Vehicle Systems Center in Warren, Michigan. And he was also the Deputy Chief Scientist of TARDEC for over 3 years. So welcome, Ravi. Good to have you. Last but not least, we have the Chief Technology Officer for the Americas of Blue Prism, John Walden. John is a solutions-focused executive with more than 30 years of success working across a wide variety of industries. He has leveraged extensive experience in technology. He's been a valuable advisor for organizations seeking guidance in aligning the business with growth initiatives. So really honored to have John with us on the panel. Welcome, John. And let's just jump right in. So I first want to start with a question that I want to address to all the panel members, which is, could you help us better understand what the true value of RPA is, especially within your own sphere of influence as you see it? And I'm going to start with Erica, if you would. Just help us better understand what that true value of RPA looks like from your perspective.
Great. If I had to say the 3 top things that we've seen firsthand with true value for RPA, it's productivity, it's compliance, and it's employee morale. Now, you'll notice I did not include cost savings in that statement. And that is because in our experience to date, we have more than enough work to be done in the department. In fact, we usually don't have enough time, enough people to get what we need to get done finished. So we really view RPA as a force multiplier, not a force reducer. And a lot of times when you talk about true cost savings as an accountant, as a bean counter, in order to book savings, you actually need to be able to say, we have this cost avoidance, this cost savings. RPA has not proven that to us to date. That's not the main benefit. For us, it's been productivity, compliance, employee morale. And 2 examples of that we've deployed for automations to date. The first one was actually the very first automation that my team deployed. So that was actually, we built an automation to clear unmatched transactions in an accounting system, one of many in DoD. And the organization that we built this for had a significant backlog of UMDs, and it kept growing. They weren't able, it was just getting out of control. There is a timeliness where these need to be cleared from an auditability perspective and just from a business operations perspective. So really the automation, again, helped with productivity, compliance, and I can say that the employees that now benefit from this automation, it's their digital assistant, really do love it, and they use it all the time. And we know that because if there is ever a problem, something happens, maybe we need to update something with the automation, we know immediately that something is going on because it really has become a regular part of their day-to-day lives. The second example, at least for my organization from a comptroller perspective, is audit readiness or audit response. We know that as the DoD progresses in our audit journey, we're going to be getting more and more detailed transaction or sample requests from the auditors. And in our case, it's going to be millions and millions of documents. Now, some organizations in DoD are a little bit more mature in their audit journey than others at the moment. They're already starting or have been getting those detailed transaction sets, and just pulling those and packaging those, frankly, for the amount that they've gotten, if they had not used RPA, some of them never would have been met the timelines for the auditors. So we really do think there's going to be a critical support lens with RPA related to audit response as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. That's very insightful. And I really like the workforce multiplier. I think that's an excellent point. Ravi, why don't we jump over to you for the same question to help us better understand true value of RPA within your world?
From a technology perspective, I may sound nerdy with respect to Erica. Some of the Army's primary software investments are in the pursuit of artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning, and autonomy development. So AI is generally viewed as an important enabler for unmanned platforms to operate autonomously in combined arms maneuver. For the Army, autonomous off-road mobility in contested environments is perhaps the most challenging, challenge for us. So two examples of things that we do in this area, specifically as it pertains to software robotics for robotics, is what we call RTK, which is the Robotic Technology Kernel. This is a government-owned library of tested and managed and vetted out completely intercompatible software packages, which together establish, you can call a de facto standard or de facto common robotics platform, and can be combined to form parts of an autonomy kit for development for specific behaviors in the development of ground vehicles and robots. The second, and then the RTK, which is the Robotic Technology Kernel, it sits on top of, it leverages the what's called ROS, which is the robotic operating system, and there is a military version of it called MROS, military ROS. And it's a software middleware which facilitates the communication of infrastructure between software components, so amongst different parties working on the development.
Thank you, Ravi. Excellent insight. John, maybe you can give us a perspective from where you sit in a broader industry seat as to what you see as the true value of RPA, along with maybe some examples as well.
Well, it's been interesting because what Erica paraphrased is very consistent with what Blue Prism has always put forth. And I started talking about this, 5-6 years ago when I talked about it in the form of quality of work, quantity of work, and resourcing. She's actually referenced it as, resourcing can be a lot of different things. It can be employee satisfaction as well as just freeing up those resources. The idea of returning hours back to the business. In the previous session, I chimed in what we were in the green room about the idea of workforce reduction. It's not the case. When we look at things like national security, when we look at things like the DoD or all of these types of organizations, that quality of work is critical. Whether you're dealing with a munitions command, where fields get dropped because people don't have time to fill them in, whether you're dealing with the HR systems in order to be able to get people paid, all of these things, it's critical across the board that the quality not be reduced in order to be able to try and satisfy the quantity of work needs. When you begin to balance those, you recognize how important it is to have a digital workforce available to an organization, that how important it is for RPA to be able to be given the work
in mass, and then have the AI, especially that Ravi spoke about, available to question, to verify, to look at things, and whenever it ends up with a lower level of confidence, be able to run that back to a human for verification. Because ultimately, while the robot may be doing a lot more of the work, you have to have those checks and balances in place. You have to have that capability there. And again, we've heard several examples. I talked about Munitions Command where we're being used, a number of others. It's really overall just the idea of not thinking about this in terms of a different workforce, but a unified workforce where the humans and the digital workers get the work that's most appropriate for them.
Excellent insights, John. Thank you. Erica, I want to turn a little bit here to RPA in terms of how it's developed and evolved over the past, let's say, a couple of years. As you see it from your purview, can you speak to particularly how you've seen RPA, for instance, combine with machine learning and how that's impacted where you sit in DoD?
Absolutely. So for us in Comptroller, we started looking at RPA as an opportunity as part of our financial management reform efforts about 2 years ago. And in those early efforts, we did kind of a scan across the landscape to see, well, who else is already doing this in DoD? That's usually their first question, right? Maybe somebody else has some lessons learned that you want to take advantage of. So when we did that, there were only small pockets of organizations that were using RPA. I think you mentioned earlier on in the intro that I co-lead the DoD RPA Consortium. We have a voluntary data call, just asking groups to report, what they're up to, how many automations they've deployed, et cetera. As of September, we have RPA deployed in all of the military departments and a decent number of our defense agencies as well. And I think the last count was over 240 deployed automations that were self-reported. We know that that's higher because that's voluntary data call. We know there's other groups out there that did not provide info, but I think it really does show that it's gaining traction in DoD, which is a good thing. So for my own program, though, back to specifically what Comptroller has been doing, again, we started about 2 years ago and just assessing, does this look like it's a good opportunity space? And very quickly we said, let's do it, let's try it. Let's prove it out, let's do some pilots and go from there. And it's evolved greatly since then, and we do have a formal program. Not only are we continuing to develop and deploy automations, I think we've deployed over 35 now to date. I have a small development team, but we've also stood up a shared service platform. So recognizing one of the big hurdles in moving out on RPA could be, especially in DoD, obtaining the approval and ATO for whatever RPA package platform it is that you're going after. We recognize that was not a small lift in our world. And we also recognize that our shop was not going to be a massive automation shop. And if we were going to spend the time and effort to stand something like that up, how could we stand that up and open the doors to others in DoD so we can help promulgate the technology across the department? So we have a shared service platform on the AWS GovCloud, high availability, and we allow multiple DoD organizations to connect their licenses. There's 2 different RPA vendors currently on the platform. I'm not going to name names. We may eventually add more, but we really do want to try to get the technology out further across the department. So we're doing 2 things, automations as well as a platform as a service to try to get that out there. Now, in terms of your other question about machine learning, we absolutely see value there. And in fact, the first example that I gave of an automation where we had benefit, the clearing of unmatched transactions, we have a current prototype going on right now where the original RPA automation that we built was fairly basic in that it was automating the data entry piece to clear that unmatched transaction in the accounting system. It wasn't touching at all on the research, the time that was needed from the employees to figure out what is that corrective action. So right now we have a partnership with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, the JAIC, within DoD. And we have a partnership, Army has a similar partnership, where we're going to be using machine learning to develop models to hopefully predict what are those clearing entries that then can be sent over to an RPA automation for that action to happen. So we're looking into using machine learning in conjunction with RPA to really harness and reap the most efficiencies that we can.
That's quite the journey that you guys have been on, quite an evolution there. So thank you for sharing that perspective, Erica. Ravi, I want to touch a little bit on something that Erica touched on, which is this whole idea of the intersection of humans and machine learning. And in particular, you had mentioned previously about the Army's robotics and autonomous systems strategy. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that strategy and how you all have looked at this intersection of humans and machines in terms of affecting autonomy.
Sure. Ryan, I'll do that. The RAS strategy, we call it the Army's Robotics and Autonomous System strategy, is really to provide decisive overmatch over our peer enemies, and so that they cannot respond to us as effectively as otherwise, and to really reduce the exposure of soldiers from harm's way. Before I go into a little bit about what you specifically asked about how we do the man-machine and unmanned teaming, I'll talk about the 5 overarching capability objectives. We try to increase situational awareness. We try to lighten the soldiers' cognitive and physical loads. We sustain the force with increased distribution, throughput, and efficiency. We facilitate movement and maneuver. Maneuver is more than just mobility. It's just doing it in a very tactful and strategic manner. And like I mentioned, to protect the force. That's the 5 overarching capability objectives. And this strategy, what it does is it changes the process paradigm from a series-based acquisition approach to more like a parallel, iterative, like a simultaneous approach. And that emphasizes and prioritizes speed, agility, and being able to leverage automation and autonomy. So autonomy is complex, and traditionally what it has been thought of as a series of linear steps, levels of autonomy. They think, okay, so but what that does, it kind of binds you into a developmental roadmap, which creates a focus on machines rather than on the human-machine system. So the Army has an alternate way to look at this, and our view of how we do autonomy is rather as an artificial intelligence which enables autonomy, as a spectrum of human-machine interaction, from manual to automated, just more like pre-programmed, to fully autonomous, partially and fully autonomous. So this helps the designs that provide systems which are much more resilient, and that involve human-machine teaming, and the humans and machines working together, and using the synergies to complement each other.
That's great, Ravi, and something as I'm listening to you here, one of the things that I'm picking up on in terms of a theme is this sort of concept of the highly resilient workforce. And John, I'm as I think about that, I'm interested in your perspective in regards to how you see that intersection between RPA and this concept of the highly resilient workforce specifically within national security. How do you view that?
I'll talk about national security in just a minute, but let's look at what's required for high resiliency. In order for something to be highly resilient, yes, you have to plan. Yes, you have to test. Yes, you need to make sure that you've experienced those elements. When Ravi had just spoken about, situational awareness, it's one thing to think you're prepared. I can give you all sorts of examples, both in the DoD as well as in the civilian world, where a backup is great and wonderful until you find that you need to restore that backup, and then you realize it's not quite as great and wonderful as you may think. Even something as simple as a fire alarm test. How many of us have, throughout the years, known there's going to be a fire alarm test on Tuesday? That doesn't raise the same level of awareness that it does if a digital worker schedules that fire alarm and not everybody in the organization knows about it. When you look at the idea of being able to keep troops safe, when you look at the expansive nature of Internet of Things overall, you have to have some automation to be able to do this. When we talk about things like protecting individuals, I've got 2 sons that are 25 Bravos, and they may be setting up or working with generators or making changes there. A lot of these have cameras on them. A digital worker can verify if it's in the right state ahead of time before they open it up to do work on it, whatever the case may be. These are places where, and Erica spoke about this too, the verification of work doesn't necessarily provide value unless you find errors. But it is a critical point to be done. But it needs to not only be reactive, as in the state that Erica mentioned, but also proactive in order to keep people safe, as Ravi was sort of identifying. And this is where, RPA in general, you have to look at what the work that you want to accomplish is, whether it is, critical nature of saving somebody from doing something, unfortunately, not in their best interest, or if it's maintaining esprit de corps by making sure people get paid or verifying amounts, verifying transport of logistics, whatever it might be, those things that may appear to have lower value but are just as critical. And you can apply RPA across the board, and you just have to think about where it is you're trying to accomplish and what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, John. That's very helpful. I want to do a slight pivot here and focus a little bit on the investment side of RPA and specifically ROI. And Erica, I want to address this question to you and really kind of how you see that investment now and in the future as it relates to ROI in your organization. And then also, how do you see a role for RPA to automate testing and standardize processes for software development and deployment in the future? I know that's a lot to cover, but I'll throw it over to you.
Well, the first part might be fast. So I actually avoid the use of ROI. Just from a financial perspective, again, I talked about this a little bit earlier. The cost savings is not a focus. So I've actually trained myself and trained even some of the leadership team around me that let's not use ROI. Let's not talk about cost savings. Let's talk about return on effort. So typically that's what I try to pivot towards, to use return on effort. Now, in terms of our automations, we absolutely track the estimated number of hours that are redirected to other tasks. So we do have quantifiable metrics, but again, we don't refer to them as return on investment or cost savings. Really, again, a lot of the metrics are, okay, what are the labor hours redirected? What are the processing improvement rates, productivity rates, et cetera? Those are the things that we tend to focus on for the most part. Now, in terms of the actual, CIO shops using this for software development. Obviously, I'm in a comptroller organization. We don't necessarily have that. We've seen a lot of automations, at least through the consortium that I run in DoD with financial management, logistics, acquisition, HR. There have been some already in the IT lane. I do know specific system P&O shops that in fact are using or starting to use RPA for some of those compliance things that they need to do from a systems perspective. And I'm really hoping that we get more interest and buy-in from a CIO cyber security perspective. Because I think the more those organizations get in and actually touch and use the technology themselves, any and all of their concerns about bots gone wild or, a bot gone rogue doing something it wasn't programmed to do, all of that goes to the wayside. So I'm really optimistic that more of those organizations will start to get their hands on the tools and start using it for their own internal processes.
Excellent. So Ravi's same question, maybe tailored to how you see RAS continuing to evolve, as well as some areas like combat vehicle robotics. Maybe you can speak to that question as well.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I couldn't agree with Erica more on the ROI concept. I'm sure we have all seen videos of soldiers returning home and surprising spouses and children at school, and what price do you pay? Do you ever look at it and say, "Oh, how much did this cost us?" I mean, it's immaterial. But to answer your question about what things we are doing, I would say three quick things. I know we are short of time. One is we continuously pursue the enhancements of what we call the autonomy stack. The autonomy stack is the autonomous system's digital brain. It's the interconnected set of software modules, comms, and controllers, which enables the system to perceive, plan, decide, and act, what we call PPDA, within the delegated bounds. So that's the autonomy stack, and we have a couple of them depending on whether it's external facing or internal facing. But suffice it to say that that's one of our big that's where we will continue to evolve. Also, we see a paradigm shift where we look forward to an area of continuous opportunity to influence and transition programs of record, not just during the software development, but the way the spirals of these software drops are, it's way past the initial development stage, well into sustainment. The third thing I wanted to say, and Erica was talking about testing, what we have is we use what are called EETs, or engineering evaluation test events. These are gated events, usually annual, which provides the venue for everybody. It's like a rodeo, you just come in, you have different autonomy capabilities, as long as you are adhering to the overall infrastructure of how things are put together with the right interfaces. We use this as an opportunity, strict engineering rigor, to compare the performance of autonomy solutions against our mission scenarios. So like I said, it's a rodeo where compatible, mature autonomy solutions, irrespective of who you are, your government, academia, industry, just bring your wares, and we evaluate it jointly in a joint operating environment. So those are the three things.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just going to throw out a question to the whole panel here and see if you guys want to comment on it. And that is, what are some recommended ways in the future to identify and assess RPA opportunities, especially within your particular areas? I won't call on anybody particular, just jump right in
So I'll jump in for a quick. I will say, not all ideas are good ideas for RPA. It's important to get a pipeline. It's important to get, some good resources submitting ideas. However, every idea needs to be assessed. So when we get an idea that comes in, we typically look at, what we try to come up with, what's a value score. So we'll look at how many people might this be impacting, i.e. how many people are performing this today? What's the estimated cycle time reduction? So labor hours redirected. What's the level of effort that it's going to take us to build the automation and then sustain it as well? So we try to do a value score. We have a suitability score. So is the process repetitive? Is it structured data? Is it stable? Are there standard? Is it rule-based, standard processes, et cetera? Obviously, the more standard it is, the better it is for RPA. We also look at simplicity, a lot of simplicity score. How many locations, the number of systems and applications the automation may touch or be involved in. What is the accessibility of those systems and applications? Because that's critical for my developers to gain access that they need to do to build that. The number of process steps, data classification, et cetera. And then we also have some extra categories where we look at, we'll assign things like strategic priorities. So sometimes, even if it doesn't have maybe a significant value score, it might be a strategic initiative that we're going to go after anyway, as well as maybe some other top priorities like we have for an audit. Example would be auditability.
Excellent. Thank you, Erica. I know we're running out of time, but John, real quick.
Yeah, if I could. I mean, it was interesting in the last session, the lady from HHS made the comment that a lot of this deals with educating people early, recognizing that there's a lot of, unfortunately, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the FUD factor that staff is seeing. And if you help them recognize, Erica's referencing the what I term in my own brain, hours returned back to the business. It's not a matter of replacement. It's not a matter of this. There's all sorts of tools out there that will help you do the valuing to be able to recognize it. But I'll be honest with you, people know what doesn't work and what is useless work. And if you can get them and help them to understand that this is not necessarily replacing them, but giving them those hours, that time frame back, it's critical. I mean, one of the things that we've done, and I hate to bring up the COVID reference, but there was a lot of data scientists doing a lot of data aggregation around COVID. And we actually, with some other partners, brought some of that data together a lot more easily for organizations as a whole.
Thank you, John. And final thoughts, Ravi, as we end here.
Yeah, I was going to say, for actually we in the Army, we actually would one of our ways is we would like the industry and academia to actually help us identify and assess what other opportunities are there. So for this reason, our autonomy, our whole infrastructure is based on what we call a MOSA, or modular open system architecture, so that we can take advantage of best in breed wherever it's developed. So this is a strategy, a win-win for all. So it puts emphasis of technical ownership on what we invest, what the government invests in IP, intellectual property, and in-house government software expertise. So we safeguard that, but at the same time, we have it open enough that we enable outside expertise and developments to percolate into our infrastructure and help us. So for this reason, once the things are put together, then we have this modular system. I told you, annual releases of core autonomy and robotic control software are freely provided annually to all government organizations, contractors, and academic partners, as long as they will sign the software development distribution agreement. And this helps both of us. And so that, I would say, is how we would approach this.
Well, thank you so much. On behalf of Government CIO, I want to thank our esteemed panel, Erica, Ravi, and John. Really appreciate your insightful comments and perspectives today on this very important subject. And at this point, I'm going to throw the ball back to our managing editor, Amy Kluber, for closing comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. And thank you to our wonderful panelists this morning. If any of these insights intrigued you, as we hope it did, we cover these topics at length outside of these events as well. You'll find resources and information on emerging technologies like RPA and beyond on our podcast and website. If you'd like to stay in the know, subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on those at governmentciomedia.com/subscribe. Thanks again to our sponsors, Bizaji, OptumServe, Blue Prism, and Axiom. Continue to follow along and join the conversation at our upcoming events this year. Keep an eye out as we're hard at work on our 2021 lineup, chock full of similar discussions like those you heard today. Join us November 19th next for our Cloud Summit, kicking off with my chat with keynote speaker, Deputy CIO Maria Rote. See you there. Thanks.